welcome to everyone. It's awesome to see people from all the different backgrounds. We've got such a great, diverse audience to share some ideas and join us for this virtual Innovator coffee series. And this month, we are really excited to have Steve as part of this, who's somebody that we've actually been able to work with in a variety of capacities. Steve is an adjunct professor with NYU, which I think so many people are familiar with. He's a board member and has just been a huge leader with the Ascend community, which is advancing Pan-Asian professionals all across North America. And somehow with all of that, Steve still finds time to not only have been in an executive role with Goldman, now he is with Prudential, looking at technology, but also being very involved with their DE&I activities. Somehow Steve manages to do it all, in addition to being a father and so many other things. So thanks, Steve, for joining us, and so glad we could have you as our Innovator Coffee Series this month. Just for the audience, a few things and kind of a housekeeping items. First is we will be recording a session. So although you can try to grab notes as quickly as you'd like, we will record it. We'll share it with all of you after the session so you can pass it along to colleagues. We also want to keep it really open. I've got a lot of questions for Steve and some research to share with all of you, but we will have time for you to ask questions as well. And you can do that by using the chat. So kind of on the bottom right, should be on the bottom right of your Zoom, you'll be able to just add questions or comments. So feel free to do that throughout the session, and we'll be looking through and trying our best to answer all the questions that come in. While we get started, we'd love for everyone as well to just introduce themselves on the chat. So feel free to say hello to other people, which organization you work with, even drop in your LinkedIn profile if you want to kind of grow your network through it. But welcome to everyone, and looking forward to making this an interactive session. If we get nothing else out of this session, I think what you will get is some inspiring best practices and thought leadership from Steve. Like I said, we've worked together for quite some time, and he's somebody that I'd consider a mentor and an inspiration for so many things that we've been doing at 10,000 Coffees. So today we're going to be spending just a few minutes to introduce you to 10,000 Coffees, and then I'll pass it over to spend the majority of our time just diving into some important connectivity topics. As some of you might know, 10,000 Coffees is an LXP for informal development. So everything that happens outside of the classroom. So we're the first technology company that helps clients around the world be able to build, deploy, and measure everything outside the classroom, whether it's networking programs, mentoring, onboarding buddies, all those things where 90% of learning happens and 85% of opportunities happen outside the classroom, but typically they're on Excel spreadsheets. And with COVID and hybrid working, those experiences have really come to a grinding halt, which has impacted innovation, inclusion, career opportunities, and just general well-being within the workplace. And so we work with organizations from J&J to Adidas to RBC to be able to scale and measure those informal experiences to create connectivity and inclusive cultures in the workplace. And through that work, we get to work with people like Steve to innovate our technology and to think about this problem. And so again, really excited to have you as our Innovator series. And maybe just to give an introduction to Steve, would love, you spend your time at NYU with Ascend and now at Prudential. What do those things have in common, and how do you find all the time for it? And so maybe just give us that kind of introduction, but also what have you been learning from connectivity in each of those experiences that could inspire some of our audience and how they think about it within their workplace?
Thanks, Dave. And thanks, Sarah, for setting this up, and really appreciate the time that you set up here. And I really want to thank the audience too for spending an hour or so with us. I enjoy talking to people and connecting people, and this is great that I have the opportunity to speak to all of you. And again, I'm thankful for you giving up an hour, whether it's your lunchtime, your evening, or your morning, to listen to me. And hopefully, like Dave mentioned, I could impart a couple of different learnings and things that we're doing across all those areas, whether it's Prudential, some of the firms I've worked with before, NYU as an adjunct, as well as nonprofit world. But you're right, Dave. I mean, I think number one, to answer your question, first is a very understanding family is required. When I spend a lot of time, both work at universities and for nonprofits. Secondly, is really thinking about how I use my time really efficiently, and how do I leverage technology to work for me, not against me in terms of spending my time. And third, I think it's just the passion and just kind of my drive to connect people. I think between the professional network I have, the academic network I have, and also the nonprofit network, there's this common bond and connectivity I see that kind of feeds each other. And I've been able to connect academics to some of my colleagues, and in the corporate world, nonprofit leaders to corporate, nonprofit leaders to the education. And there's this basic connectivity I think we're all looking for across all three of those areas. So I'm really happy and fortunate and blessed to be able to spend time in all three appropriately. But I do think that it's really important, as we all think about some of the things that really drive us and motivate us, we find what that is and really be able to invite other people to it. And that's one of the key things I wanted to share. I mean, throughout this conversation, which we'll keep very informally, I wanted to say that three things, and I'll emphasize it at the end: invitation. I'll talk a little bit about the 10-minute rule, and also being present. I think those three things will be weaved into some of the things that I want to talk about, but actually inviting people into what you do, and having them see some of the things you're doing really gives people an opportunity to learn and to lean in as well. So the second part of the question, what I see common, again, I think clearly people want to connect, whether it's in their own industry, outside their industry, and really connect to professionally grow, to be mentored, as well as to give back. And I'll talk a little about that, because as part of some of the organizations I spent time with, depending on where you are in your career journey, I see different populations wanting to connect differently. So we'll talk a little about that as well. So again, thanks for the invitation to come here and talk. And I'm happy to dive into some of the areas that I see across all three of those populations.
That's awesome. So just as people are continuing to join the session, and thanks for that intro, Steve, we will be leaving some time for questions from all of you. So you can use the chat on Zoom to drop in questions or comments, and feel free to introduce yourself, your organization, and even your LinkedIn profile if you want to build your network with some of the other leaders that have joined this session. So over the next 50 minutes or so, we're going to cover a lot of topics. We're going to go over just general connectivity. We've got people laptops, and we've gotten people their Zoom dial-ins at their organization, but how do you keep those relationships of connectivity in place? We're going to talk about the impact that has on diversity and inclusion, knowing that everyone has bold and ambitious and important D&I metrics, where a disconnect of employees really puts that at risk. And we're also going to look at that from just a general career development. We know a lot of people in hybrid working are afraid that if they're not at the office and getting that FaceTime at the water cooler as much as they used to, they're not going to advance at the same pace, which has really put certain populations even at more risk of advancing and getting those opportunities. So some really important topics. And one of the interesting aspects, and Steve, maybe I'll turn this over as a thought for you, is Steve's in a CIO role where he's looking at things from a CIO lens as the VP of digital technology at Prudential. And it's an interesting new forefront for people like you, Steve, to solve this new type of problem, which is around helping colleagues, maybe helping members of your diversity networks still stay connected with leaders and colleagues despite being in hybrid. Why does that matter to people in the technology functions of organizations? And how are people in your type of role partnering with other stakeholders to be able to solve this important issue?
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Yeah, I definitely think that technology leaders and CIO leaders of organizations are really looking at this, because we think about connectivity, in the sense of being able to have that informal network which studies have proven that the people that have informal networks probably have a higher propensity to succeed in their organization. But I would say that especially with the obviously the pandemic and the remote working environment and eventually coming to hybrid, we're seeing there's opportunity to really secure that, create the right infrastructure around it, leveraging technology. And actually also with technology allows us to not just solve this problem just internally, but also to really connect with partners and providers externally as well, whether they're technology providers, they're service providers, or even other networks and organization and affiliates. So I think technology is provides one of the main support systems to actually create that foundation for allowing for connectivity. At Ascend, we did think about how do we connect so many of these our Ascend members that work across various parts of the North America. Ascend is the largest Pan-Asian professional network, both in US and Canada. How do we connect them across different industries, different geographies? And is it just about having people attend conferences or attend sessions, Zoom sessions, but what can we do more? Because they are spread out all over the country geographically and in different regions. So I think, as we talked about before, I think 10,000 coffees and what some of the solutions that you provided, we adopted, I think at first in Ascend Canada and then in Ascend US, to really provide that opportunity for not just people to connect because they want to, but also give people the opportunity to share and use the platform to impart their knowledge. Because we do see that different parts of different populations, especially on the executive ranks, they're looking for ways where they can actually have that platform to share their knowledge, to really be able to continue to contribute into their, I would say, golden years and be and have an impact long term. So I think technology can provide that support system and foundation. And we can learn a lot from many different companies, especially in, let's say, in the tech industry, that had to work and had to figure out how, remote workers way before the pandemic, how they do connect them into the overall workforce and have them connect with their employee bases. So, we could talk a lot about some of these other industries as well. So, Dave, I am also curious from you, like as you look at and you've worked with many different companies in different industries, how are some of these industries differ in terms of how they're using technology to connect people?
Yeah, I mean, what you said is a really interesting point, right? Where leaders are looking for ways to be connected with their teams. They know that is direct to retention, to innovation, and to culture. But typically in organizations, it's just a handful of leaders that do that who have really strong executive assistants to help them. Yet, the dozens or hundreds of executives, depending on how wide and far you look at for an organization, are without the tools. And so with that, they're without the connection. And what we're seeing is organizations directly connect whether their leaders have automated and scalable tools to connect with their colleagues, not on Zoom town halls, everyone can do that, but to actually build relationships and have dialogues is directly related to whether they're retaining their top talent and whether they're creating the right ideas and whether they're developing people to have the new types of skills that we all need in this new world of work. And so the organizations that are losing are the ones that are still stuck on Excel spreadsheets and that are trying to just hope for executive assistants to just do it on their spare time. And the ones that are winning are the ones who are looking at this next frontier of technology to say, hey, it's not just good enough to have laptops and WebEx on everyone's laptops. And even though they might come in 2 days a week, where they're now decentralized. So let's almost apply like online dating technologies where we can create connection and data-driven matches so that everyone has those networks internally. And it's really a turning point that will separate the winners from losers in this war on talent, is whether organizations are prepared to have that network of connectivity. That's not just an internet connection in WebEx, it's relationships around people that's going to make the difference. And that, maybe that's a good cue. We actually have a poll set up, and we'll keep having some of this impromptu conversation, but I'll maybe call for our first poll question. So all of you can actually use the poll, and the first question is live. So you can use the poll question through your Zoom, and if everyone wants to add their answer there as I kind of queue up the next question, would love to get everybody's feedback, and feel free to add any comments or thoughts that get sparked from that poll question directly in the chat as well. But while people are filling out that question, Steve, maybe just to think about what you shared, like what do you think is the business case for, like, you've been at the forefront of DE&I and technology and innovation for your entire career, and unfortunately not everybody is at that same spot, and so they're trying to wrap their heads around this. What is kind of the business case that everybody could bring back to leaders for why this connectivity and relationships matters? Like, what's the risks that they need to mitigate, and what's the benefits? Like,
Yeah.
how should we think about that?
Yeah, I think about the employee, for example, the employee experience that really matter. Employees now, especially with what we've gone through for the last 18 months, and now slowly returning to a hybrid work environment, they really have higher expectations on how they work and where they work as well, right? So as we move forward to this post-pandemic hybrid environment from a total remote environment, I think, giving employees the flexibility to meet their expectations on where and how they work is going to really going to help us in terms of the areas that really matter, like celebrating wins or collaborating, communicating, right? Learning and employee onboarding experience. I could say that the employee onboarding experience is going to be key, and has been for the last 18 months, when many of us, including myself, joined new companies during this COVID time. And that first impression of how the whole onboarding process goes with an employee when you join is going to make a huge difference in employees' satisfaction in the long run. And the studies have shown that the first 6 to 9 months of an employee's experience really helps shape their thinking about their employer, what their long-term opportunities would be. And that goes from everything from, like, how they got their, technology set up, who's actually helping and coaching them, who's actually providing them kind of the mentoring and the apprenticeship that they need early on in their career. I think, depending on the level, you may need less of it, but I do think that every single employee that joins, whether they're new hires out of college or even executives, need that onboarding experience to be crisp and delightful, quite frankly. And I do think that there are ways to do that we're using technology, given this hybrid environment. I can share that across all 3 lenses of where I intersect in, both in the corporate world at Prudential and some of the previous companies I worked with, as well as my academic world with NYU and my nonprofit world, that we are continuously trying to learn and innovate in this space. I know, for example, at Prudential, we launched something called the Talent Marketplace, and many organizations may have something very similar, but this is an opportunity for people to gain new skills, look at new opportunities, maybe adjacent opportunities or totally different opportunities, but really understand what skills are really needed to get that opportunity. I thought, based on from everything I've seen, Prudential has done a great job putting that together. We're also about to launch something called Gigs, where we're going to give employees opportunities to actually partake in small projects, gigs on the side, where they can learn new skills, meet new members of the company. We're a big company, so we want the opportunity for people to meet each other and really learn some new things that they're interested in. They may not have the complete skills to do it, but they will get the gig so that they can learn and and continuously advance their professional career. A couple of fun things we've been doing. I think a lot of companies have adopted it. This came from some of the tech industries, like meeting free Fridays and having that opportunity for people to really connect with each other, focus on their work is really important. And also a lot of different focus groups. I've been involved in a lot of the BRGs in many companies in my past, including Prudential now, and we have a lot of focus groups where people reach out and invite them in to actually opine on different things that we're doing to really connect employees internally and externally. I think from the NYU lens, I could share that, it's really interesting how I can kind of shift from corporate to NYU, but NYU over the last 4 years has been a great experience for me teaching technology classes at NYU at the graduate level. But we think about the whole student experience and how that has changed, total remote, now hybrid as well. And it's all about the pedagogy of student learning. And by the way, I've never used the word pedagogy until I started working at NYU as an adjunct. There's a whole new set of vocabulary that I've learned and picked up. But things like rubrics and making sure that we have innovative simulations where students can really learn and connect with each other, professors, other students, and understanding what is good, what's fair, and what's outstanding is really important. And I take some of that as well into my corporate life, because I do think we have to demonstrate and communicate to our employees what is good, what's acceptable and what's excellent, and just kind of give them those kind of metrics. A specific example would be like in my classes, what I do is I give them rubrics on what I consider all three of those categories, from fair, good to excellent. And then I give them opportunities where they can connect on their own with other students, other alumni, other professors outside of what I'm teaching to build on the scaffolding of projects I give them. And I think it's very similar to what we're trying to do, even in the corporate world with gigs. We're trying to give them opportunities to gain new skills by connecting to other people so that they can continue to advance their skills and their professional development. So I consider the things that we do at NYU very similar to the gig program. And I think there's a lot of analogy and learning from both. And then finally, for the nonprofit world, I've been a board member for a long time. I did step down from the board early this year, but I'm still very involved as an executive advisor at Ascend. But we do think about how do we connect our members and what are the technology we use. And I mentioned we did bring in 10,000 copies after 10,000 copies was also originally brought in by our Canada team. But the technology has not only enabled us to just connect with our own members across different segments, different geographies, but really partnering with some of our key allies, whether that's Alpha, NABA, Catalyst, Conference Board, and really work with them to expand the capabilities of reaching out to other allies and really getting that diversity view across different impacted population, I think is another key factor in terms of why we adopted 10,000 copies. And there's a lot of different similarities and differences I see from career levels of how they want to use this platform as well. I mean, students are clearly looking for opportunities for mentorships and internships with companies. Early professionals really looking to opportunities to develop their career and how they can advance and grow their network. Mid professionals, we're definitely seeing how they want to break into senior management. What skills, hard and soft, probably more soft skills at that mid-level professional, can they have, or what they need to have besides a sponsorship for them to actually advance. And finally, something I mentioned, the executives on these platforms and these nonprofits really want an opportunity to have that platform to share their knowledge and their thinking and impart them to others. And I think part of it is, they're at a point in their career where they've achieved a lot of success, but think about, can they teach? Can they get on nonprofit boards? Can they work with other universities like what I do? And I think there's tremendous opportunity to build that connection between corporate and nonprofit as well. And other peers of mine I talk to, a lot of them are interested in what they want to do in their golden years, and providing this connectivity with various members and sharing their knowledge, I think starts creating ideas for them on what they want to do. For me, it was teaching, but other people have other ideas, let's say advising or being on a board of a profit or a nonprofit. But I think there's a tremendous opportunity for people of all different parts of their career to really connect and either try to get something that will help them in their career, or push something out that will also help them in their golden years.
That's a really good segue about the experiences that people are looking for. And we'll share this survey results, but we did a survey across professionals across North America, and it's pretty drastic how disconnected people feel. And not only have 55% of people shared that employee connectivity has become more difficult in the last 12 to 18 months. What we've also seen from recent research from Harvard Business Review is that employees are reporting more silos than ever before, in that they don't have the ability to be creative, to innovate with colleagues, despite potentially being on Zooms all day. They just don't have that same diversity of connection that helps us get work done and feel a sense of belonging. And kind of further to that research and some of the points that you brought up, Steve, around gigs and giving people mentoring opportunities in their first 6 to 9 months, that really matters. And professionals from the survey result, 62% of US employees will leave their companies for better mentoring, connectivity, and development opportunities. That's a pretty drastic number. What, when you think of this, what should people be taking away in terms of how to think about these experiences from a technology perspective, and what could we possibly do with a stat like this in a time when the Great Resignation is in full swing?
Yeah, I don't know if I have the answer for that big question, but I could share some of my learnings and my thoughts.
Come on, Steve, you've got all the answers to these problems, the billion-dollar problems. But
there's a lot more people that are much smarter than me in this space, I think. But I know I'm fortunate to have that kind of intersection among different industries. But I think people think about how to replicate kind of that physical connection that people had, because they think having that physical connection is the answer. How do we replicate that in kind of the hybrid environment, and I guess in the past, a remote environment? But I think it's more than that. I think it's beyond that. We're going to live in a hybrid environment for a while, and studies say that this could be years, right? And this could be the new norm. I do think that how do we take technology that we're leveraging in the hybrid environment and actually make it even better than the physical environment should be the goal, right? I know today, even though I've been on meeting, but people were, Teams chatting me privately one-on-one for quick questions. If we didn't have that technology, they'd be waiting for that answer in an email or for a meeting. And I think, there are some basic, easy things that technology can do. There's also some hard things that they can do. Developing employees and having them really connected with each other has been always a focus for, large organizations. I think this has even been the case before the pandemic, right? Because many industries did have workers and employees working remotely, especially in the tech field. But what the pandemic and the remote environment has really taught us is who's really good at this and who's really not. And I'm sure, Dave, you probably have some good ideas there as well. Coaching is another one that has come across. I think learning opportunities and coaching has come across as two big areas where, connectivity helps with coaching, as well as learning that organizations have to think about a little differently. I remember like many years ago when employees were coached, that was a bad thing, right? You did something bad, so you needed a coach. Now it's a good thing, believe it or not. Like, you got a coach, wow, you're really special because you've gotten a coach and someone's really helping you with your career. So it's so fascinating to me how things have shifted a bit. But coaching is something that's a lot of employees are looking for as part of what they can receive from the organization. It's great to be mentored. It's great to be have all these opportunities for other roles. But coaching is something that I think more and more employees are looking for. Because they want that personalized coaching, because they really want that coaching to be not about just what they do at work, but just holistically as a person, in their entire professional career. And coaching is being looked at as a benefit in many companies now as part of the employee experience. But even simple things, I would say, Dave, how to be inclusive in a hybrid environment really matters to help, with that statistic and lower the number from 62%. I was talking to someone recently about how they got around the problem of they've been working remotely for years, even before the pandemic. They learned some good practices. So I do think that there are a lot of people we could tap into to understand how they effectively work and connect in a hybrid environment, because they've been doing it all along. One example was, the meeting after the meeting, right? Everyone's in a room in a meeting. You're on the conference call. And then the meeting ends, and there's like a 5-minute meeting afterwards. So the remote people that are remote, they're totally out of it. People in the room aren't having that 5-minute meeting. A lot of times decisions get made there. So how do you solve for that, right? How do you make sure that in a hybrid environment, you make sure that you're being inclusive and you're part of that. And for this person, their strategy was to have a friend in the room always, and then really get to make sure that friend is representing the person that just hung up on the conference call, and then you have that 5-minute meeting after a meeting. Things like that, I think small little learnings, bite-sized, snack-sized learnings we can get from various employees that have been working in this hybrid environment as well. In my academic setting, when I teach in a hybrid environment in the classroom, I actually, I have a big screen, and then I have students Zoom in there, but I have every single student open up their laptop and connect on Zoom as well. Because I wanted, even though many of them are in the classroom, I want them to have the direct FaceTime, as well as show that this is a very inclusive environment with a lot of students that are also remoting in for many different reasons. So that's another small bite-sized learning that I do. I think also employees are looking for ways to learn and grow their career in the way they want. So whether it's synchronously or asynchronously, and just as a definition, synchronously means we're learning synchronously here. We're live, but over video. Asynchronously is a lot of this content would be recorded later and people can look at it later. That's asynchronous. But I think employees are finding that with their multiple juggling, their family lives, their personal lives, and their work lives, they have these moments in time where they want to learn, but they don't have the opportunity to kind of be connected and plugged in real time. So learning asynchronously is very important in addition to learning synchronously. And then finally, I would say, I was telling someone this, like information is plentiful out there. There's tons of information, tons of data. The quality and the expertise around it is what really matters. And then finally, I would mention the culture part of it, right? Having a culture and a mindset to lean into areas is really important. Being part of an organization where we want people, whether they're in technology, they're leaning into business, or business leaning into technology. I think we want that kind of a culture because we all have something to contribute and learn. I like to invite my partners, my marketing partners, my business partners lean into technology, and vice versa. I lean into the business and marketing as well. And having that culture is really also a very important part of that connectivity, right? We talked about the technology, but having the right culture is also, and that mindset is really important. So those are some of the things that I've learned and some of the things that work for me today.
I think there's so many things that we can that I want to jump into, but one of the things that came up, and it's actually a perfect time to cue our third poll question, which everyone should be able to see. So Steve, you talked a lot around providing, I think something we can all relate to is the meeting after the meeting, and the fact that so much of learning and career growth happens informally. And typically leaders weren't able to scale the way their employees could come together to have those informal conversations unless it was just serendipity or just proximity of being literally in a physical meeting together. And that's changed. We've got to figure out how to democratize and scale those informal outside the classroom conversations, because it is where decisions get made, learning happens, and careers are created. So a poll for the group is, so we call those informal development experiences. Formal is things like classroom-based, course-based learning, and informal is all the things that happen outside of the classroom, which is what 10,000 Coffees technology is the first to be able to build and deploy all of those different types of configurations of informal, whether it's group conversations or one-on-ones or mentoring or coaching. But just for the audience, would love for people to take a minute to share what kinds of informal, so those that are not in the classroom, what kind of informal experiences does your company currently offer or is planning to offer? And you can choose all that apply. And for those, ERG and BRG, I know it's an acronym and we should define it, but that's employee resource groups and business resource groups. And so an example of that would be things like your Pan Asian network, or your Pride network, or your women's network, and knowing that those are often the source of networks for so many people. And on that note, as people are filling out this survey, one of the best things we've been able to launch from a social impact lens is the Ascend program with Steve and team to enable allies and Pan-Asian professionals to build connectivity regardless of where they are. And thousands of new connections and mentoring experiences have been created through this. And that's the same technology that we launch inside of organizations to make the same impact. What would you say are, a lot of people, as we approach things like Black History Month in February and International Women's Day in March, of course, Pan Asian Heritage Month in May. Steve, what are some of the specific wins that kind of come to mind from the Ascend technology initiative that we rolled out that organizations could potentially think of when they are trying to achieve the same objectives within their own 4 virtual walls?
Yeah, no, great question, David. And what comes to mind is when we rolled this out at the nonprofit at Ascend, the opportunity to really action what we considered really working with our allies. That was key, right? We talk a lot about within the different networks of Ascend, but I think having the platform to really enable us to work with our allies and be on, be on the same panels, have our allies, teach our community teach our allies was really important. And I think the similarity there would be for organizations as well, using a platform like this and using technology like this, where we can really share each other's, heritage months, our values, some of our key blockers and restraints, and how do we actually unblock them, and how do we achieve some of the success together. I'll be honest, a lot of times I'm very interested, obviously on Asian Heritage Month and everything goes on in Asian. I'm probably not as focused on with some of the other BRGs, but really, how do we do that? It's not because I don't care, but I think it's really because, time, the scalability, and where we're going to focus our energy on. And I think, leveraging technology like the ones you have, as well as other things like, we use internally like Teams, can really unlock that. And I do think that there's a case to be made, a business case to be made on how do we do that at scale. And when you do it at scale, you can do leveraging technology. Can you not only do it within the internal confines of the company and, kind of working together across the different BRGs and ERGs and different functional and business units, but you could do it with other organizations outside, right? So I think the informal learning happens, you think about it, myopically within your organization, but informal learning happens just as much, I believe, outside as well. And how do you connect the networks outside is going to be really important. So, some of the key recommendations I have is, continue to leverage technology. I'm saying this as a technologist, but I think talking to your technology partners, talking to your CIOs, talking to your emerging technology group, they have access and they have a lot of good information around up and coming companies that are innovative in this space. And they're really well connected to, let's say, internal and external venture capital groups, large companies like, Microsoft, Salesforce, Amazon, many Fortune 500 companies use all of them, right? If not all, if not much more. Leverage companies like that because they're also very interested in how to create that opportunity to connect together. And peers, like you mentioned, working with peers inside and outside the industry. One of the best things that I've done and I've shared with people is that you take certain business models from one industry and see if it applies to a different industry. Or you take a business model that didn't work many years ago for whatever external reasons, and then see if that can apply now. And some of the great innovations that happen today is just because these business models just were too advanced for the time. They didn't have the right technology, but can they actually work today? I think those are some of the really interesting plays. I was talking to one venture capitalist that focuses purely on failed business models from the past, and can they actually work now, given where we are with technology? So I thought it was a really fascinating thesis around how he looks to invest in companies and how to drive more companies into that space.
Timing is, as it's just so, sometimes you can have the best product, but if timing isn't there, it's a tough one. And on the thought of kind of, I guess, failed business models and challenges to innovation, we know, just a quick thought for you on some of the research that I think it came out about last week. And a lot of it has to do with innovations, which you cued me around failed business models, because I think what might not have worked for organizations 3 or 4 years ago, today could fully work. And do we have the cultures and connection to create new ideas? And last week, some pretty staggering research from CLA advisors came out where, and this is a tough one for leaders to think about, but network position of employees is a 5 times better predictor of their success. So do colleagues have relationship and diversity of networks? That tells us whether they'll be successful 5 times better than things like their work experience, their personality, and even their IQ. So, you might have got the best resume, you might have hired the best person at an organization, but if they don't have the relationships, they just will unlikely be successful in that organization. And you've talked about how important that is in the first 6 to 9 months. What advice would you share with leaders for how to think about that in terms of the tech systems and the solutions that can help address something so important for colleague success?
Yeah, Dave, you brought up a really good point. I do think that you might have hit on maybe another question during the interview process to find the right type of employees, but about their networks. But I do agree that I do agree employees that are well connected, in and outside their industry, probably have a better chance of success, given the fact that they can lean on these different groups and organizations. Couple of pieces of advice I would say, leverage your partners, your vendor partners. They have a lot of learning. I'm talking about some of the big, consulting firms as well as some big technology firms. Leverage them because they have a lot of learnings, and tapping into them for that external expertise and network is really important. Number two, I would think about, how do you actually help people create those networks, right? How do you help them create these networks, whether that's internal or external? Again, thinking about ways, programs, learning opportunities to do that. I mean, mentoring programs that are run by BRGs, ERGs are, pretty standard. I think that many companies do that, but how do you scale that? And that's going to be really important. Dave, I'd like to point out that, it's not just having, pinpointing those employees that have those networks that's going to be successful in an organization, but having enough of them. Because I do think the great thing is when you have enough of them, they actually are the ones, because of the network, share their network of others that do not have them, right? So, I mentor people, and I have a pretty extensive network across 3 different types of entities, and I share my network with others. And I think that's very valuable. It's one thing to just have that network and leverage it for yourself, but if you can share that with others, I think that's really important. And that's something that is also something very important to look at. It's not only having that network, but the ability and the wantingness to share.
And on sharing your network kind of leads to the second part of this research, which was, this is the reality check for leaders and executives. So everyone can brace themselves if they're any kind of VP or senior level. But senior executives typically have over 200 relationships inside their organization, whereas individual contributors, the majority of the workforce inside most organizations, have less than 10. And so if you look at who's set up for success and who can get a lot of work done, leaders that are trying to think of how do I get my team to be more effective and to perform better, there's a real disparity between the network position of an executive and what those of their workers have. And if you add on things like a new hire, a new hire is maybe 1 or 2 relationships when they start. So how do you move someone from 1 or 2 relationships to that 200 where they know how to get work done and they have that support network? And I think that's, when you talked about scaling these mentoring or networking programs, what should leaders be implementing, or any technology? Of course there's 10,000 coffees, but what have been some of the tactics or ways that you've seen leaders trying to address this gap?
Yeah, no, great question. I think that especially for new leaders that join organizations like Prudential, I've seen them try to tackle it, it's the scaling and creating that network, almost like a brute force method where, having, setting up listening tours or having the opportunity to talk to one-to-many, sessions through these virtual chats is really important. When I came on to Prudential, I was so fortunate. In the first 60 days, I must have met, over 200 people whether they were people that were originally arranged for me to meet because it made sense from a business perspective, but then they would then extend the courtesy of setting up two more for me. And then I also had the opportunity to have these listening tours across different parts of the organization where I would sit in on a session that was set up for me where 15 to 20 people across different parts of the organization to really understand what's going on and get that really valuable perspective being a newcomer. And secondly, creating that instant network. Those are really hard to do for everyone, obviously, even if we wanted to do it. But I think leveraging technology and then almost like self-service that, right, and scaling that through specific means like 10,000 coffees or other technology that we've seen, I think is really important. And it's one thing to say like, hey, go connect, create your network, but we have to give our employees the best chance possible, the best tools possible to do that. And I think there are a lot of technologies out there that can do that, and that's why a lot of companies are looking at how to do this. Whether most of the time they're not going to build it on their own. This is not one of their core competencies, but how do they leverage a partner or an outside organization to help them with that? So I think that's critical. I mean, it's an area that I think more companies need to make an investment in as we think about unlocking kind of that new employee for what we hired them for, and giving them the best chance success in their first year, let's say, with those connections and informal learning.
We couldn't have timed this better, Steve. It's actually coincidence. If it seems like we've rehearsed this to everyone on, we haven't. This is just good timing, but it cues one of our poll questions, which is around, and this is something that I think is very new to a lot of workplaces, is how do you scale those connections? And a lot of people are using Excel spreadsheets, or they're just expecting managers to do it, or as you described, Steve, a lot of organizations might just tell employees to, hey, just go build your network. And then people are kind of like, okay, well, here's the employee directory of hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of people. What do you want me to do here? So for those, the audience members, feel free to hop into the poll and add some of the, how do you help create networks for people on scale, and what does that look like today? So we've launched that poll question here. What would you say is, I think about Ascend, Steve, and making the decision to move from kind of manual or analog programs to actually implement a technology solution. What do you think is the reason for organizations, as somebody that's advised some of the top executives at organizations to move to technology solutions, and in some situations it doesn't always make sense, but what would be your advice for when and why is the time to move from kind of low tech or more analog solutions to be a tech enabled solution? And maybe you can share kind of when and why that happened with Ascend, and what other people can think of within their own organizations.
Yeah, Dave, thanks. I know we've had conversations with Ascend and 10,000 Coffees, for a while, and I think the Canada team has implemented that originally. But I think for the US team, we definitely saw that, the membership for Ascend was growing. How do we actually connect them? We would have these sessions, maybe once a quarter. A lot of them were, at the time before the pandemic, live sessions, but so, these were confined to a certain geography. But as we thought about how do we have these sessions and engage our entire membership population across different cities and time zones, how do we do that? And the solve there and the business case there was leveraging technology, clearly. And I think we've had a tremendous success doing that. And it's looked at as one of the key membership benefits for the Ascend organization when people join Ascend. I think on a similar note, I think other organizations, profit, nonprofit, are looking for opportunities to do this as well. And I could share that, in that kind of hybrid environment where we're using technology like this to connect with people, I think the integration of both kind of this online live kind of, I go back to synchronous learning as well as asynchronous learning, and being able to kind of flip between the two and integrate really well is going to be really important. One of the examples I kind of think about is at NYU, we innovated something called the jam sessions, where we have almost like a virtual conference, but it actually integrates both online, synchronous, as well as offline, asynchronous type of learning, and be able to employ that seamlessly. I know a lot of us, are clamoring to go back to conferences and go to like live conferences and, get to meet people informally. A lot of that, probably hasn't happened in a while, or, a lot of the sessions turn hybrid. Sorry, all virtual, not hybrid yet. But that all virtual session is very different than the live session. And could you actually replicate that live session through a hybrid environment is going to be really important. I know I get invited to these conferences all the time. I say yes, and I try to do my best to make it. But I'm not taking off a full week like I used to do. Go to a conference, meet people. It's almost impossible to do that, right? So you try to squeeze in a few sessions here and there, and then your schedule gets busy. You can't attend. Then you're asked to kind of review the videos because they've recorded everything, offline, and then you don't have time to do that. So I think there's a better solve there, and a lot of it is technology based as well. And I think it's important that organizations adopt it.
And what do you think is I think inside organizations, there's, people might feel like they're more Zoom fatigued than ever before, and leaders and executives have more work than they've ever had. Despite that, what's the why now for those leaders to get engaged in those activities?
Yeah, no, great question. I think the why now is the business case around, talent. Every company is experiencing, hardship around acquiring new talent externally. Even our partners, we know, this is all the partners that we work with, they're experiencing hardship in acquiring talent. Talent is, good talent is really scarce. So one of the best ways to address that is also retain talent and upskill your talent. And I think a part of that is driving that connectivity and the communication with our employees from our executives as well. At Prudential, I think we do a tremendous job having our executives communicate regularly through, town halls and synchronous sessions like this, but also have them asynchronously and made available for our employees. It is that, war for talent, that is going on right now, and finding those real skill sets. And that is the business case, quite frankly. I think employees are also expecting a lot. They want a lot in terms of how how their work and how their growth is tied to kind of their core life goals and their specific goals for their profession as well. And we need to kind of address that head on. And I think the successful companies will do that. They will provide opportunities for employees where the organization is supporting them in terms of their professional and life goals. And the ones that will lose out will not. So more and more, I think employees are looking for, real tie back to their values and their mission for the work that they're doing. Even consulting firms that we work with, they no longer want, the consultants at the consulting firms that get employed by organizations like Prudential. They no longer want to just do let's say the grunt work or kind of the back office work. They really want to do the work that's going to be meaningful for them and is going to provide them with long-term professional growth. So I think it behooves all of us, every one of us, to think about how do we address that.
Yeah, and I think pretty much every organization at this point has also set goals around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And a report came out from Deloitte a few months back where connection between colleagues, like those relationships, is the root cause of contribution. So for underrepresented colleagues, having connection is critical. But as we think of employee resource groups and business resource groups, they can't just fly everybody into New York City to meet everybody all in 1 hour speed networking sessions, right? We have to, use technology to connect all of these decentralized teams so that they have that connection that can lead to contribution. And somehow, Steve, we're at the hour, and I promised to let everybody go right at 2:00. So we only have a few minutes left. I think if there's any, I don't want to say a futurist, but Steve, you're always thinking about kind of what's next in the technology landscape. Everyone has been is starting to plan for what next year looks like. What would you say are kind of 2 or 3 tips or best practices that people could go and action coming out of this to make sure that they've created the connection for the new hybrid workplace?
Yeah, no, great. I mean, I would love to impart, just in a minute or two, like some of the what I think could be really valuable people to kind of action. I love the no meeting Fridays. I think that really allows people space and time to connect. So don't use no meeting Fridays just for, I would say, your chores or, heads down. I think use some of that time to really connect. Our leaders are using that time to really do one-on-one connections with individuals that they want to talk to that haven't had a chance because of their busy schedule. Really like that practice, and we're continuing that. I think, I've been involved in meetings where people jump in a meeting and the first thing they do is like get into business. I think we've learned, but there's still people that need to learn like that first few minutes, really, connect with them personally and see what's going on in their lives, and checking in is really important. Um, I started to employ something similar to what I did at the university at work, which is office hours. I found that office hours, you kind of create this virtual office hour, like a Zoom session, and then you have people just jump if they have time. If they don't, that's fine. Is a tremendous practice for leaders. So I like that concept. And encouraging wellness, right? I'm making sure that people take the time to mentally take a break, do a physical break, a walk, do some exercises. I was talking to a colleague who said like when a meeting gets canceled, he uses 10 minutes of it to do push-ups. It's like great. You need some of that physical energy for your mental energy. The last thing I would say is just more of a advice on thinking about 3 things to do every 3 months, and that's the way I've kind of started 4 years ago, and that's why I started at NYU and invested my time in teaching while working. Every 3 months, explore what you want to learn, right? And what support system you need, and jot them down and just recheck it every 3 months, and getting kind of support partners across the different segments to really support you. For me, it was really exploring the startup space and working with entrepreneurs. So I was able to leverage some of my friends in venture capital, and I'm an advisor to fintechs. And then also 4 years ago, I wanted to really think about longevity of my career and what would I do after corporate. That's why I started getting involved at NYU, and now I work with the head of the department to really keep me on track for that. And then finally, getting to eat better, want to live longer, exercise more, and getting a coach. So Prudential has been tremendous in terms of providing those kind of benefits, and I really do applaud them for doing that as well. But even if you don't have that, please look into doing that, because I think we all want to live long, extraordinary lives and really have an impact. So those are some of the things I would share.
Steve, awesome to have you as our innovator for November. Congrats on everything you've done at Ascend, at NYU, and now at Prudential. And to everyone that attended, I'm glad we could share an hour with you. And stay tuned for the next steps email. We'll share a recording. We'll share that Harvard article and some of the research that we had referenced earlier, as all of you think about connectivity and inclusion in a hybrid workplace. So thanks again, Steve. Congrats on everything you've accomplished, and everyone have a great rest of the evening or day, depending on where you're located.
Thank you so much.